And so for the next few months and through the fall, we're going to be unpacking a series on work and vocation. Now, I realize that for many of us, I don't want to talk about work. I work 5 days a week, 6 days a week, but I want to tell you, there's more to it than meets the eye. You know, as a pastor, our job, I feel like part of our job is to really help you in the area of, I use this word theology, but theology is just the study of God. And I want to tell you this morning, what you think about God determines how you act. You may not always make that connection, but what I think determines how I act. You know, when he talked about the phone call that produces anxiety. Now, everybody's experienced anxiety, right? I have anxiety right now. How long is he going to talk? And am I going to make the game? It's like I didn't have enough to eat. And so anxiety, though, then opens the door to a whole bunch of choices. I can medicate, I can run, I can hide, I can fight, and he said, well, then it led to peace. And so what we think about God determines many times how we are going to react to our circumstances. And so through the course of the series, I want to give the nod to two authors that we've drawn from. We're not just going through their books, but we actually have been studying their books over the summer. One is an author by the name of Tim Keller, who wrote a book called Every Good Endeavor, and it's about this subject of work. He says, and this is the quote out of his book, he says, the challenge is to deepen the faith and theology of our congregation, as well as enabling them to engage the city with the love and the truth of the gospel. Hear that? Those words, engage the city with the love and the truth of the gospel. And Tim Keller's church is in Manhattan. It's a church of several thousand people right there in New York City, in the heart of Babylon, if you will. And yet his heart is to not just keep everybody within the four walls safe from a terrible world, but actually to equip them to go out into that world and make a difference. And that's our heart as well. It's interesting, this has biblical precedent. In the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah oversaw a generation that had been carried away into captivity because of their sin by wicked Babylon. And God spoke to Jeremiah to tell this to the people as they were being carried away. Here's what he says. He said, I want you to seek the peace and the prosperity of the city that I'm sending you to, that I'm carrying you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Isn't that amazing? That in the midst of their judgment, in the midst of their awful, anxious season, God said, don't just pray for yourselves. I want you to pray for the peace of this city, because if the city goes well, it will go well with you. You know, there's a word that we use to describe what we do for a living called employment, right? Now, hopefully most of the people in this room are employed doing something, right? You're not, unemployed. Maybe you're employed as a worker or as a supervisor, or maybe you're employed as a student. Actually, you pay to do that, but you're engaged as a student. But a word you're going to hear us use a lot is the word deployed. Interesting, employed has this feel of, you have a business, I have a skill. If you pay me, I'll show up and make you successful, right? That's how employment works. And if I'm disemployed, that means that you're not paying me and I'm not showing up. I am without a job. Deployment seems to be the reverse of this, doesn't it? Deployment is, I have a gift, I have something, and I'm being sent towards you. I don't think God employs us. God deploys us to a lost and hurting world. And some people would call that being on mission, or some other phrase of the sort. Listen to the words. Another book we're taking off is a book called, it's called Life Work by Darrell Miller. Darrell Miller is an author. He's used in a lot of Bible schools, YWAM, and other places. But he says this, imagine the powerful impact the church could have on the nations if all believers saw themselves as missionaries sent by God to redeem and restore the sectors of society where they are deployed. Man, would you let that filter in this morning? Imagine if we saw ourselves, rather than hiding from a broken world, from an evil world, and rather than just engaging on their terms, what if we saw ourselves as missionaries sent into a broken world to be the salt and the light? That takes a bit of a dream. You know, God is a dreamer. Someone said, dreams are the things that bind us to the heart of God. God is a dreamer. And dreams are dangerous things. Now, you ever heard anybody say, oh, you're just a dreamer? You know, in a critical way? Like you're just, you're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. Frankly, I have never met anybody of that. I've met a lot of people that were so earthly minded, they were no heavenly good. But God is looking for people who will dream, because dreams are the things that bind us to the heart of God.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. One day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
Martin Luther King gave that speech in 1963 on the Washington Mall. 250,000 people heard that speech. That speech was on the anniversary, the 100-year anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. He did that in the shadow, looking down that hallway at Abraham Lincoln sitting on the other end, who authored the Emancipation Proclamation. Martin Luther King had a bit of preacher in him, didn't he? It's interesting that if you listen to that entire speech, what he just did there, he actually went off script. There was a performer, an African-American woman in the front, or the first few rows, that in the midst of his scripted speech yelled out, "Martin, tell us about your dream." And if we were to watch the whole thing, you'd see he made a shift in his speech, and he went off onto something that was more on his heart, or as much on his heart as it was on the paper in his mind. And he shared a dream of racial equality. For most of us living here, it's like, well, sure, of course, but boy, in 1963, that was a dream. We all know that things have changed a lot in those 30 or 40 years since he had that. We know that politics is at work and all kinds of other factors, but that guy saw something in the distance that other people had a hard time getting their mind around. He paid dearly for that. He didn't live another 5 years before he was assassinated on the front porch of a hotel room in Tennessee. Others came along behind him like that had a dream. You think about this here, this thing of dreams are the things that bind us to the heart of God. When I was working, before I was in ministry many years ago, I had a construction business. We built custom homes for people. I lived in Northern California at the top of the state, a little place called Mount Shasta. So people were moving back in the late 70s, early 80s. They were moving up from Southern California, selling a tract home, if you will, that they bought 30 years earlier for about 20 times what it was worth back then, and moving up to Northern California and building their dream home. You ever heard anybody talk about, man, I'm just gonna build my dream home, right? This water in the front, view of the mountains, a few ducks and geese, my kids are gonna have room to play. Hear people talking about, oh, this is my dream house. And I built those for people. It's funny how many times that dream house turned into a nightmare for people, and actually, they didn't even, their marriage didn't survive to move in. You heard people talking about, what I want to do? I want to go on a dream vacation. I'm just going to get somewhere where I can just, all the shrimp you can eat, and I'm just going to kind of look out on the water, and my phone's not going to ring. No one knows where to find me. This is my dream vacation. Or you know what? I just wish I had your job. I wish I had the dream job, right? where I just stood in front of thousands of people and they all loved and worshiped me and I got paid $1 million every performance I did. I want to be a rock star. Or, I'm just looking, just the dream date. If I could just find that perfect guy, we just look in each other's eyes out over the water and then I hear music softly playing somewhere and no one has any zits or problems. I'm just gonna find this dream. I'm never gonna see any blemish. It's just, you are my, there's a term years ago called the dream boat. You're like, I'm gonna sail away with you, right? I guess there's nothing wrong with dreaming, but have you noticed that a few weeks ago, my wife and I were up in the Sisters Wilderness and we took a hike from a lake called Three Creeks Lake. And there's about a 5-mile hike that goes up around the back of the rim in this place called Tam MacArthur Rim. And it's about 8,000 feet, something like that. And in most of the hike, going this direction is all straight up. And as we hiked, it was kind of like, we like hiking, we get out, but I was like, we're never going to get to this place. Like just plodding along through the woods, plodding along through the dust. It was hot. And every once in a while, there'd be a little break in the trees and we would look out and we could see this shimmering lake and we'd see that where we were headed. We're like, okay, I can do this. And we'd get back in it another half hour and I was like, and then all of a sudden there'd be a break and we'd see where we were headed. And I want to tell you that when we got to that peak and we were standing looking over everything, it was totally worth it. Did I want to quit along the way? Yeah, I didn't bring enough granola bars. There wasn't anything. There was no Starbucks up there. It was just like, but it was worth it. Have you ever thought about this? Over the years, I've looked at people and worked with people and thought about how our lives are like a series of snapshots. Now, I want to say something. This will date me, all right? But back in the day, before iPhones, before internet, there was a day before internet. People would take these things called pictures with a camera that had this thing in it, this stream or this roll, and they would make these things called slides. Now, a slide was a miniature picture in a little cardboard frame. How many remember slides? Anybody been around? Yeah? That's cool. That's retro. Hang on to your stuff because it'll be valuable in about 10 more years. But so what you would do is you would take 100 pictures of your wedding or your vacation, and then you would put them in these plastic carousels, and then it would, and you would watch a slideshow. Look, everybody's showing up. Look, and you'd see this sequence of events that led you through the story of whatever it is you were watching, right? Well, of course, now you can take all those slides and bring them down to Shutterbug. You can load them on your computer if you have the right software, and you can make a movie out of it, right? Sometimes I think our lives are like those slideshows. That over the years, we get into circumstances and situations and we get a snapshot of where we are. And sometimes those snapshots are amazing. I met the perfect woman. Look, she's beautiful. Look, she's not calling me anymore. Oh. Throw that slide out, right? I got my job I've been waiting for. I got fired. I got an A, I got an F. I was accepted, I was rejected. I made a bunch of money, I lost a bunch of money. And so over the years, we have all these variety of experiences. I found the perfect church. I left the perfect church. It's like, people come to me and say, I just love you. I love this place. And then they like disappear. Come on, send me a note or something, will you? Just send me a thank you note, a goodbye note, a see you later note, but don't just disappear. Why do we disappear from marriage and jobs and church and other things and community and accountability? We disappear because we're disappointed. We disappear because we're disappointed. You know the word disappointment? I love to unpack that word. It means the lack of appointment. My appointment was broken. So I came to the perfect church with an appointment for happiness, and you disappointed me. You didn't keep your appointment. You actually held me accountable for my life. I got married because I had an appointment with bliss, and then you disappointed me because you just, you're not going to put up with that and live with me, right? I had to change. And so our show is made up of these highs and these lows, but together they make the video. Now here's my point, is oftentimes, depending on the slide we're looking at, We make decisions that affect our whole lives and the lives of other people around us. Anybody ever made a bad decision in a moment of anxiety that he was just talking about? Last night he hit it again. Like, you could have preached. You should just get up here and do it. It's like, it's like in a moment of anxiety, has anybody like ever eaten like that whole bag of Doritos? Like, like I can't believe, where'd these things go? Well, there's no one else in the room except you. Have you ever found yourself in a place that you shouldn't be, in a bed you don't belong in a bar that's not going to help you, in a situation that is just a fruit of your anxiety and your bad decisions? I don't know about you, but I have. I have. And so how do we act, and how does that connect to this bigger picture, this dream thing, right? Solomon was a man who wrote 3 books of the Bible, or authored a good portion of them: the book of Proverbs, the book of Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon is describing, in a sense for us, and I believe it's at the latter part of his life, he's describing what the slideshow looked like. Here's how he describes it in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and vineyards. I made gardens and parks, planted all kinds of fruit trees. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had slaves who were born in my house. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers. Oh, and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. 800 wives, 200 or 300 concubines. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. It's amazing. If Solomon was around today, he would be the guest speaker at every business event. Wouldn't he be the guy that you just want on your board? Wouldn't he be the uncle that you wish, you had? Wouldn't he be the dress for success and plan for success, meeting that you were invited to, and he was able to list his credentials like that? I just want to have an uncle like Solomon. And I'll listen to his other words. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. So in a sense, and I want to say this morning, there's nothing necessarily wrong with any of the things we've listed. The dream vacation, the dream girl, the dream this, the dream that. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but Solomon realized something a few thousand years ago that I'm wondering if we even grasp even today. If Solomon, when with those credentials, again, today, he would be extremely desirable. I submit to you that not much has changed in 3,000 years. And then he says this, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Man, that's depressing. But Solomon, please don't beat him up too bad. Solomon, at the end of his life, was making a very astute observation. 38 times you're going to find that word if you read the book of Ecclesiastes. The word in the Old King James is vanity, vanity, all is vanity. 38 times he's going to use this word. You know what that word means? The word means this. See where that went? I was standing in line at Fred Meyer's yesterday checking out, and there was a lady with a little baby girl, she was just old enough to sit up. And the mom was distracted checking out, and this little kid was making eyes at me, and I was, I'm trapped here. And then she went, and she spit right on my shirt. I was like, that was gross. I hope you're leaving soon. Those handy wipe things you get at the entrance for the carts. It's like, this is what the word meaningless means. The writer in Psalms said, what is my life but it's a vapor? It's here today and it's gone just like that. No, so what Solomon's trying to get across to us is like, look, he said there's nothing wrong with all these things, but if we think that those things is what our lives consist of, he said, then our heart is fixed in the wrong place. Listen to this quote by a guy named Tony Ranke, who's a pastor back in the Midwest. He says, at its root, sin is not wrongdoing, sin is wrong adoring. Sin is riveting my heart on any treasure or security that replaces the treasure and security we can only find in God. If you leave that up there for just a second, think about what he's saying here. We think of sin as we've crossed some sort of behavior line, but I don't think God sees it that way at all. You know, I think if you can hold on, if you can hold on to success without losing your soul, then there's a good reason for it, and it's a good thing. If you can hold on to possessions without losing your soul. But Jesus said it, what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? He said it in another place. He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the other things we chase after will be added unto us. You know, when I talk to people oftentimes about their job, I don't hear a lot of people, I hear very few people say, hey man, I have been deployed to this place. Most people, it's like, oh man, I am just enduring this thing. They're just seeing the snapshots. I get up every morning, I drag myself out of bed. What for? Well, to go to work. Why do I go to work? Well, to get a paycheck. Well, why do I get a paycheck? Well, to pay for my house. Well, why do I have a house? So I have a place to sleep. Why do I have a place to sleep? Well, so I can get up in the morning and go to work, right? And then we know how this goes. We call that this daily grind, don't we? See, those are the words of people like you and like me. And if you think getting into ministry is going to help that, I believe you're just a little bit misinformed. I think some people have this idea, well, oh, you're a missionary. Wow, would I love to have that job? You know, or you're in ministry, would I love to have, because then I'd get up every morning with purpose. Well, I guess there's a measure of truth to that, but I want to tell you something. You can lose your heart in ministry just as easy as pouring coffee at Starbucks. The things that cause us to lose our heart have nothing to do with our environment. And so I want to just kind of run down a story here real quick. This is the story found in Genesis chapter 37, a 17-year-old boy. I'll be fast here, but I want us to capture this because I believe it kind of leads into where we're going for the rest of this season we find ourselves in. It says in Genesis 37, there was a man named Israel, or Jacob. More than any of his sons, he loved this guy named Joseph because Joseph was born. He was the younger of 12 siblings, 12 sons. And Joseph was the youngest. He'd been born in his old age, one of the youngest. And he made an ornate robe for him. An ornate robe was a colorful robe. Robe was a symbol of royalty. Color was a symbol of royalty in the Old Testament. People couldn't afford expensive dyes. And so people with robes of color was a sign of royalty. Now Joseph was only 17-year-old. He wasn't a ruler. But it's interesting that his father spoke to him prophetically by doing this. He was saying something to Joseph. Joseph, there's something special about you. There's something God has for you. You and I need to hold on very clearly and very carefully to the words that God speaks over our lives. Don't let them fall to the ground. And so he makes this robe, and when his brothers saw that their father loved him, Joseph, more than them, they hated him, and they wouldn't speak a kind word. You know, hatred always follows, opposition follows on the heels of calling. Opposition will always follow on the heels of calling. There's always going to be somebody or something that says, I'm going to get in the way of whatever it is you think you can be. Some people have that gift of discouragement, right? And oftentimes those people are closest to us. So watch in verse 5, when Joseph receives this prophetic thing from his father, what does he begin to do? He begins to dream. Joseph has a dream. He tells it to his brothers, thinking, well, this will help. They'll appreciate me now. They hate him all the more. He said, listen, I had this dream. We were binding sheaves of grain. My sheaves stood up while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down. His brothers said, oh yeah, you're going to reign over us? Will you actually rule over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Joseph doesn't quit. He keeps at it. I had another one. Sun and the moon, the 11 stars are bowing down to me. You think they're getting it now? Oh, 11 stars. Who would that be? His father and his brothers rebuke him. What is this dream you're having? Will your mother and I actually bow down to you? His brothers were jealous, but his father kept it in mind. They hate him so much that they want to kill him. But I believe there's something more at play here. I believe there's forces out there that not just want to kill you, they want to kill the dreams. And you know what you and I are? We are vessels of the dreams. We are vessels of the dreams. So Joseph, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to go back in just a second. So Joseph goes after his brothers and finds them out, shearing sheep. They see him in the distance and they plot to kill him. Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that an animal ate him. We'll see what happens with his dreams. Reuben steps in. Let's not kill him. Let's just sell him off to a bunch of slave traders, right? They tried to rescue him. So Joseph comes to his brothers. They strip off his robe. They take and throw him in the cistern. And it says, and as they sit down, they look and see a caravan of Arabs, Ishmaelites, coming on their way to Egypt. And Judah says, hey, what should we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's just sell him to the Ishmaelites. Don't lay a hand on him. He's our flesh and blood, our brother. That's sweet of them to care. His brothers agreed. Let's sell the guy. So let's not kill him because God will judge us for that. Let's just get him out of our lives. Let's just get him away. Just send him off into exile somewhere. I'm going to disown you as a brother. I'm going to pretend you don't exist. Some of the deepest wounds we have, and many of you know this in here, come from the people that have been the closest to us. Some of us have come to our flesh and our blood with a dream, and they have shot the dream down and then ran us out of town. That's where dreams begin to die. Dreams begin to die when the people closest to us it's not that they just don't understand, it's they don't want to understand. Why? Because their hearts have shriveled up to this small place of jealousy or envy, anger, unforgiveness. Pastor Tim said last week, he said something that stuck with me. He said this, he said, you'll never do anything significant in your life unless you deal with unforgiveness. It's not what has happened to you. It's what you and I are going to do with what's happened to me. You see, that slide is ugly, this place of betrayal by those who are supposed to take care of me. And I can just be fixated on this one slide, this one picture. And that one picture can control the rest of my life unless I deal with it. I cannot stop what's happening around me, but what I do have control over is dealing with the anxiety and the things that it produces in me by the grace of God. So he's sent off. Now watch, here's the heart of it. Joseph was taken down to Egypt. This is in chapter 39. Potiphar, an Egyptian, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him. Now watch. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered and he lived in the house of the Egyptian master. Isn't that a redeeming story? You just think, oh, well, see that? God's going to just have his way, and he's going to just bless Joseph anyway for paying his tithes and being a good guy, a man of God. And so in spite of all they're doing, Joseph, I'm going to just bless you anyway. I'm going to prosper you, which is probably part of it. But I like the next part. And it says, the Lord was with Joseph. He brought him to live in the house of the Egyptian master. When the master saw the Lord was with him, the Lord gave him success in everything he did. Potiphar put him in charge of the household, trusted into his care everything he owned. And from the time he did that and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and the field. Do I go to work? And would my employer, if I was your employer, would I say, you know what? My business has prospered since you came to work for me. You know what? The office is a better place when you show up. You know what? The relationships in this team are amazing. There's something you have brought. And I'm just some heathen Egyptian, and I have no idea what it is. What is it with you? What is it that you kind of bring to this team? I mean, I know I'm being a little facetious here, but it says when Joseph showed up in a place of betrayal and injustice, and he doesn't get sold into the next denomination where they're going to make him a worship leader. He gets sold into slavery by a bunch of heathen Egyptians. And in that place, because Joseph is there, everybody prospers. Wouldn't that be amazing for people to say about me or you? You know what? Wherever you go, everybody around you seems to prosper. Everybody does better. The atmosphere is cleaner. We are happier. We are encouraged. You have encouraged my soul. That's hard to do when you look at your job like a dead-end job. Living the dream, right? It's hard to do when all I do is see my job as a means to the end, which the end being to retire in some dream location and never engage humanity again, unless I want to just buy some tacos or some wind chimes or something on the beach, right? But you see, Joseph had no idea really what was going on. It's almost like he was just kind of floating along in this stream of crazy train. He gets plucked out of the stream by this guy named Potiphar, and God says, hey, Joseph, dude, I got this. I'm going to prosper you. And guess what? I'm going to prosper everybody around you, even this guy who has no clue that I even exist. That's amazing to me. Wouldn't that be cool if we saw ourselves as just these little baskets of goodness? I'm here, and you're going to be blessed that you hired me. I know we laugh because it just sounds so, oh, come on, please. You don't know where I work. Man, my boss is the devil incarnate. Man, my coworkers are all demon. I mean, it's just like, we in a sense, see, this is the issue. We don't have an employment problem. We have a faith problem. We have a knowledge of God problem. We see the slideshow, the slide that we're living in at the present time is this cursed existence that I just have to endure and eke out what I need here. We have a faith issue. Joseph, there's something about Joseph that God says, dude, I'm going to prosper you wherever you go, Joseph. It's interesting that in chapter 39, it says Joseph was well-built and handsome. So not only did he have a good attitude, but he had he's a nice bod there, right? And it's like, I was looking for the word. I was sort of searching for an appropriate word, but let's just leave it at that. He was a good-looking guy. It says he was well-built. You can fill in the blank for that. And it says, and while he's there, his master's wife takes notice of Joseph and says, come to bed with me. And and he refused. Now, you think about it again, in today's world, we call this entitlement. Hey, I've had a rotten life. I was a dreamer, and my brother sold me into slavery, and now I'm like in my 20s, and I'm still a virgin, and I'm living in an Egyptian's house, and I'm a slave, and you want to what? Me? Really? Well, this must be my reward. I mean, I've heard people rationalize, well, this must be, hey, come on, everybody needs a break once in a while, right? And I am in charge. So I could actually sort of participate in this, and I could probably kind of just cover it or hide it, and she wants it. He could rationalize it away as entitlement. Man, if I don't hear that today, I kind of deserve to be a little bit hard to live with. You don't know what I've been through. Yeah, well, sure, I'm a little edgy, but I'm not angry. Oh, okay, all right. Sure, I'm late all the time. Sure, I'm this. Sure, I complain a lot, but you don't know what I've been through. So here this incredibly juicy temptation just shows up in the form of this beautiful woman. And I don't think she was some hag. Those people, she had to have been good looking. And she says to Joseph, hey, come on. And Joseph, I love his words. No one is greater in my house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you're his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Joseph hadn't forgotten who he'd come from. I believe Joseph, regardless of the fact that he didn't understand all that was going on, Joseph realized, even though I don't have that cloak with me, listen carefully here this morning, I have that anointing with me. And there's nothing in the world worth sacrificing for that anointing of a dreamer. Dreams die in the bed of immorality. Dreams die in a place of self-indulgence. Dreams are easily killed in that place of entitlement. Man, I've been around ministry for 30 years, and there's nothing like serving people that gives you this attitude of, well, I kind of deserve a little bit. Come on, right? My phone rings for you. When can I, right? The gold and the girls and the glory, someone said, are the things we touch as ministers, and everything comes crashing down. And so in this place of temptation, he says, how could I do this? And so day after day, she tempts him to go to bed. He won't even be with her. One day they're alone in the house. She grabs him and he literally runs out of his clothes. She calls the servants and says, look, this Hebrew has been brought here to make sport of us. He's come in here to sleep with me, but I scream, this lion woman. And Joseph runs out, and for that, he's rewarded with prison. So here, Joseph goes from being rejected in his home, to sold as a slave, to being bought as a slave, to working as a slave, and for all that, his reward is to go even lower. He's in the dungeon. He couldn't get any worse. Now think this. While Joseph is in prison, 39, the Lord was with him, and he showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Joseph is put in charge of all the prison and made responsible for all that is done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. And what's amazing here is that God of all the nations, now brings Joseph. I mean, I don't think it got any lower than being a slave of the Egyptians, one thing. A prisoner of the Egyptians is a whole nother level. And yet here is God caring for these people by bringing in kind Joseph. Joseph had to have taken care of those people. Joseph had to have treated them well. Joseph, the condition in that dark place had to have gotten better. All because Joseph held on to the dream. So, you know the story, the baker comes in, the cupbearer comes in, Joseph interprets their dreams. What does he continue to do? He continues to move in his anointing. He continues to interpret dreams. They get out and they forget about him. They forget his kindness. They forget his power. Joseph sits. Now, 13 years later, Joseph is 30 years old. He was thrown in at 17, 13 years. You think about 13 years of your life. Man, I've complained about 3 months of my life. Am I ever going to get out of this? Are things ever going to change? Have you ever chafed at your existence? How long am I going to be here, God? You ever found yourself in a financial situation, you think the world's come to an end, in a relational situation? I'll never be happy again, right? And so again, we are fixated with this little snapshot. Joseph just keeps on living. And so the story is told that he comes out because Pharaoh has a dream that no one can interpret. He sends for Joseph. Joseph shaves and changes his clothes. He comes before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says to Joseph, I had a dream. No one can interpret it, but I've heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Wouldn't it be amazing if people saw us, you and I, and said, you know, I've heard about God, but I don't know him. But I've heard you do. I've heard that God answers prayer. I don't know how to pray, but I've heard you do. I've heard there's truth out there that actually resolves the issues of my life. I don't know that truth, but I've heard you do. My prayer this morning is that we would grip this, man. You know, the struggle with me over the years, and I could tell you all my crying stories and whatever, but you know, the struggle has not been, at the time I thought the struggle was with people who just didn't get it, or people who just weren't on board, or situations where there's never enough money. I want to tell you something. In ministry, there's never enough money. There's never enough volunteers. You can go to Rick Warren down there in Southern California. He'll say, well, we just don't have enough money. Really? Well, I'd like to have your not enough money, right? It's all relative. Or it's with a relative. But the problem is this. It's not that there isn't enough. The problem is that I've lost my heart somewhere. And if you really get close to me and listen to me, you're not hearing faith. You're not hearing dreams. You're not hearing truth or God. What you're hearing is just this whining male individual who's lost sight of God, but I know too much to just totally reject God. And so I've just really become this religious person with a shriveled up heart. That's an awful way to live. And that's not what we were designed to do and to be. And it's a miserable middle because, like I said, we know Joseph knew too much. He knew he'd held on to that promise 13 years before by his father, that anointing. And I think we find ourselves there in this dungeon going, well, where am I going to get my When am I going to get my recognition? When am I going to get my chance? And so the end was this. His brothers show up. There's a famine in Egypt. Joseph's been appointed now to save Egypt, which is amazing. And his brothers and the family show up because they're starving to death in Israel. And his brothers come in, and it says Joseph could no longer control himself before all the attendants. And you know the story. There's this back and forth with his brother Benjamin, and his brothers don't recognize him, and then he doesn't make himself known, and he plays with them for a while. He wants to see his brother and his father. And it says Joseph cries out, everybody leave. And there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly the Egyptians heard him in Pharaoh's household. And Joseph said to his brothers, now you can imagine this moment, huh? Pregnant with expectation. I am Joseph. My father's still living. You'd be like, wow, yeah, well, about that. You look great, Joseph. Man, years haven't hurt you. That beard is awesome on you. Really, since we saw you last. When did we see you last? I remember when we saw you last, when we threw you into the well, sold you to the Arabs, and said goodbye and told Dad you're dead. And you're in a position to just cut our heads off and no one would know. It says they were terrified. They were speechless. And in this moment, Joseph reaches this crossroad. Now listen, this is the end here, Joseph reaches this crossroad. And he could have said, you know what? You are dead. You know what? I'm back to the entitlement thing. Now I realize, now I know why I'm here, because when you get here, I'm going to be in charge and I'm going to give you back. Now I know why I'm in power. No, he doesn't. Listen to Joseph's words. It says, I love these words. These are the words of the gospel. These are the words of Jesus Christ on the cross. These are the words that you and I need to hear. These are the words that make us come alive. Come close to me. Come close to me. He didn't just say, all right, well, I'm going to save you and I'm going to save Dad, but you guys are living on the back 40 and don't ever talk to me again and you're going to just get what, no, he says, isn't those words of intimacy? Come close to me. If you listen carefully to the gospel, alone at night, in the places of rejection and judgment and discouragement, I pray you'd hear the words of a redeemed Savior. It says, hey, come close to me. I'm not going to throw you away. And Joseph said, don't be angry with yourselves, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years there will be famine in the land, but God has sent me ahead to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He's made me father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household. That is the consummation of a life of a dreamer, even though he's only 30 years old. Listen carefully here. He sees himself as a father to the man in charge, a father to the heathen. He doesn't say, I'm a victim. He doesn't say, well, this big mistake. No, he says, God's made me a father to Pharaoh. How do you like that? I long for that in you and me, that rather than seeing ourselves as victims and rather than being self-absorbed and rather than self-medicating to deal with our pain, like Jesse was saying over there's a whole group of kids that are fatherless. There's a generation all around you. I don't care where you work. I don't care if you're a bricklayer or a barista, wherever you go, you look around and listen, and what you hear, folks, are the words and the attitudes of a fatherless generation. And if you will dream with God, if you will be willing to look at your life, instead of looking at it through the filter of disappointment and the filter of not getting what you thought, and through the filter of abuse, and through the filter to see that there is a sovereign God. See, here's the deal, right? God didn't just save Joseph. He saved Joseph. He saved his brothers. He saved his father. He saved his family. He saved the whole nation. And he saved a godless Egypt. And the God that we serve is big enough to pull that off. And where in the world is he going to get people to help him do that? He invites you to dream with him. But if my dream is just about buying that boat, if that's as big as I can dream, you are, excuse the pun, dead in the water. You're not going anywhere with it. If that's as big as you dream, I'm going to tell you, it's just going to take one little dink to get you disappointed and off task. If you just come here to just receive from the church, but never desire to serve, you've never engaged with the dreams of God. It's still, frankly, all about me. And what do you have for me? And if you don't give me what I want, you're a big disappointment to me. And now I'm going to go find another one. And when does that cycle ever end? This isn't about me. I'm sorry, it's not about you either. It's about Jesus. And it's about the kingdom of God come on the earth, like we sing and say. I'm going to give you the last scripture. Worship team can come. Philippians 2:13 says this: "It is God who is at work in you and me, both to will and to do of his good pleasure." What an amazing thing, huh? So there's the anchor that no matter what happens in the particular photo I'm engaged in right now, gosh, I'm just trying to get through my junior year of college. Oh, I'm just trying to get through middle school. Oh my gosh, my marriage isn't what I thought, or my job isn't what I've always wanted. But listen, if you can hold on to this anchor, it is God who is at work in me, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. It is God who is at work in me, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Father, as we finish this morning, I want to ask you this morning as we finish to really ask yourself before we take off here, how is my heart this morning? What is the condition of my heart? Is the condition of my heart just totally tied to my location in life right now? Am I just living, just looking every day over the fence at the grass that's greener on the other side, thinking that's going to change me? Now, I'm not going to discount. There may be there's time for change, time for transition. But do I see myself this morning employed by an indifferent world, or do I see myself deployed by an engaged God? Think about that this morning. Do I see myself just employed by an indifferent world, indifferent to God, indifferent to his word? Or do I see myself deployed by a God who's wanting to engage the world with grace and truth? Some of you this morning, some of us, I think God would ask us gently, hey, what happened to your heart? What happened there? Because it used to beat with faith and passion, and now it seems to just bleed with cynicism. Come on, what happened? I'd like to begin to heal you. As we finish this morning, we're just going to finish with worship here in just a minute. And if you need prayer, we'll be up at the front. And if there's something we can pray with you about. As we finish, would you really take that up with God here tonight, this morning? I mean, Lord, how's my heart? How's my heart?